It's time for another edition of Lewis at Large, 60 minutes of smart talk radio featuring guests from all walks of life in conversation with your host, Warner Lewis. So sit back and lend us your ears for the next hour. Now here with today's first guest is the host of Lewis at Large, Warner Lewis.
Well, welcome everybody to another segment of Lewis at Large. Yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck, and of course that means some smart talk radios in your future, and this segment is no exception. Very happy and pleased to have with us Scott Irwin. Who is Scott Irwin? He's a native Kansan. He earned a doctorate from the University of Texas and retired after 47 years of elementary, high school, and university science teaching. He keeps life in perspective by surrounding himself with people who know more, shoot better, and handle fishing rods better than he does. He's from the Emporia area, got a brand new work called An Outdoor Sporting Life, a celebration of heartland hunting, fishing, friendship, and landscape. Scott, how are you, my friend?
I'm well this morning.
Well, we're pleased to have you here. I do have a question for you. A lot of people in their retirement, they fish, they hunt, they play a little golf, they travel a little bit. You decided, in addition to all that, to write a book. Tell us what the motivation was.
Well, the motivation was really a nice coincidental intersection of retiring and continuing with a 40-plus years of writing an outdoor hunting, fishing, wildlife conservation column for the Emporia Gazette. And people through the years were nice enough to offer some pretty positive feedback about some of the columns, by no means all of them, because when you write a weekly outdoor column, some of them are going to be sort of bulletin board material about upcoming events and so on. But for those columns that dealt more with either a humorous look at issues regarding hunting, fishing, even wildlife conservation, game laws, ethics, the ethics of outdoor activity, you're going to get some nice compliments from time to time, and that happened often enough, and people would say, why don't you put some of these columns together in a little book, because you've been doing this a long time. So that's really sort of what provided the urge to go ahead and do it. Having more time as a result of retirement, and still writing the outdoor stuff for the Gazette and some other papers through the years. Just as you have said about what you do with these interviews, it's something I do because I enjoy it, the writing.
What about, did it take, again, this is sort of a collection, but was it difficult to sort out all the different stories in the material, or did it all come pretty easy?
Well, some of it came easy because I had computer files and even just old-fashioned yellow pad copies of original manuscripts for some. Others, I won't go into all the grimy details, but if you've ever had the experience of keeping something on one of the old, now nearly antique floppy disks, and sitting on that without upgrading and transferring it to something, a flash drive or some other form of storing data, you lose some of those. So I had to go back to the Emporia Public Library and literally dig through decades of microfilm and microfiche, every day's Gazette for probably 20 of the 40 years. And dig up some of those. Some of those were not good book material, and some of them were triggered memories. That's really what this book really is sort of an exercise in not just sharing my memories or sharing columns of memories from through the years. What I really hope the book does, and people are telling me that it does, is it triggers their memories, the memories of the reader about their fun through the years in the outdoors. And sometimes it's comedy, sometimes it's semi-tragedy, it's goofy things that happen. I tried to write the book really from the perspective of kind of an unpretentious, everyman's modest, sometimes comical, sometimes nostalgic reflection of outdoor experience. And I've not felt any need. Well, if you read 2 chapters of the book, you won't have any trouble seeing this. I felt no need to try to impress the reader with my superior outdoor skills. Many of the chapters, and each chapter is essentially one of the columns from through the years. Many of the chapters, I'm really poking fun at myself and even some of the very tolerant friends who've put up with me outdoors through the years as well.
Scott, when you, and again, if you just joined us, yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck of Lewis at Large Radio. We're in the middle of a conversation with Scott Irwin. He is a former teacher at the university and also the primary and secondary level. He has put together an interesting work, a collection of his columns written for the Emporia Gazette over the years. The work is called An Outdoor Sporting Life, a celebration of heartland hunting, fishing, friendships, and landscape. Let's talk about the landscape. What is it about the state of Kansas? And my gosh, it certainly, as we all know, has been the butt of all kinds of jokes and probably all kinds of misconceptions over the years. What is it about this state that we do love so much?
There's much more variety. There's much more variety in topography, geology, even agricultural patterns in different parts of Kansas. As well, I have a good colleague here in Emporia, Cheryl Unruh, that wrote a book called Flyover People. You may have read it or heard of it. It's a wonderful book that's a collection of her columns based on growing up in a small town in western Kansas, Pawnee Rock. And mostly what she does is she hits the nerves. She hits lots of favorable nerves of memory for people who grew up in small towns in the Midwest. But she titled it Flyover People. In fact, it's really sort of the theme of a whole series of her columns for many years. And I've just done essentially an outdoor version of Flyover People. And the Flyover People, you've probably figured out, those folks who have this stereotypical impression of Kansas as billiard table flat, no imagination required to drive or fly across the state. Well, those flyover people, we are the flyover people, and the people who fly over have missed the point entirely. Yesterday afternoon, I hunted quail with a good friend and neighbor, 35 miles south of Emporia, in really the southern edge of Greenwood County. And I promise you, the landscape down there is different than it is in this Cottonwood, Neosho River basin of Lyon County. The patterns of crop, pasture, even just the overall landscape and the hilly nature of it has a different slant. And fortunately, there were also some quail down there, so we had a really wonderful afternoon. We did our usual, we enjoyed our usual percentage of spectacular missing.
Right.
which as I age, I do with great regularity. But we harvested a few quail and had a great time, and then had an equally good time driving across more of that spectacular landscape and across the dam of a wonderful watershed impoundment to the home of the host, because some of these folks are a little sensitive about having their name revealed. They don't want 47 other aspiring hunters to ring their telephone in the next 2 days. But this fellow was just a story all unto himself. Really colorful individual. Lived there in that area his whole life in South Greenwood County. A farmer, rancher, and a very clever, multi-skilled man with tools, restoring old vehicles, a wide variety of interests, reads widely. One of the things that so often happens, LBJ as a president and as a congressman, what really enhanced his career by taking advantage of people who thought because he talked like a Texan, he was generally stupid. And this fella didn't talk like a Texan, but he talked vintage dialect for South Greenwood County. And at first glance or first listening, one might conclude, well, this is just another old geezer. Not the case, not even close. With just 20-minute visit with this man, he revealed multiple talents. He was interesting. He asked smart questions, and he listened well. And we're standing really in the machine shed outside a beautiful home he's built on the shore of this watershed impoundment. And it's in rolling tallgrass prairie with patchworks of small row crop green fields in some of the creek bottoms and so on. That's an example. Northwest, north central Kansas, far different topology, far different landscape, but great people, interesting people. I think maybe in some ways there are about three strands in my book. The reverence that I have always felt my entire life, and I think my parents and older siblings raised me to look at the outdoors this way, is that it's a gift. We're a small part. We're a tiny strand in a great big web of planet Earth. And we must take care of it. We must respect it. And one of the ways we can do that is to appreciate the talent and the gracious resourcefulness of the people, the farmers, ranchers, landowners who take care of the land. And this gentleman that we were visiting with yesterday, who allowed us to hunt 2 hedgerows on just one part of his property, and we had a great time. And then we had an even greater visit with him. So when I think of the Midwest, not just Kansas, but the Midwest, and even some of the years that I'd lived and taught at a university in West Texas, for the most part, it's the people and the combination of the people and the experiences they enable us to have on their landscape. And if we respect that and treat them with respect, it's amazing what a good return we have for the energy we put into that.
I'm curious, young people spend a lot of time with video games. They spend a lot of time inside. They spend a lot of time on cell phones and texting and all those things. Do you notice, has that taken away from young people out on the Kansas landscape where they're hunting and fishing, or do you notice that at all?
Yes, I do notice it notice it. Yes, I do. Short answer is yes. I will say I've become more encouraged in the last 2 or 3 years by the variety and number of not just wildlife conservation groups, but groups of all kinds who are doing what they can do to get youngsters outdoors. There's a chapter in my book where, and it's nothing more than a story of one evening where 24 young kids made available to us through Big Brothers, Big Sisters, the local or regional chapter here, and an outdoor sort of elder group of people who work with children in outdoor activities. One of the organizations is actually has its national headquarters in Wichita, and I want to say it's Pass It On and something. Anyway, it's working with kids outdoors. That group from Wichita provided a rod, a little, a beginner's fishing rod, push button reel. The line was already on it, a bobber, a hook, and a little tiny sinker. that group also provided and demonstrated for the children how to thread a worm on a hook. Each child got a little tiny styrofoam cube with a dozen fat, juicy worms in it. And each one of those 24 children was matched up with an adult volunteer from here in the Emporia area. Mostly we were people from, let's say the Ducks Unlimited chapter here, or Quail and Upland Wildlife, and some of the other wildlife conservation, Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever. And those volunteers came from several surrounding counties, matched up one-on-one with a child, ages probably 6 to about 11 or 12. And in one evening, we had children go all the way from pretty reluctant to touch that earthworm to threading their own worm, casting the whole assembly, the bobber, line, hook, and sinker out, catching fish, and by the end of the evening, taking the fish off the hook all by themselves, putting it on a stringer or in a wire live basket at one of the nearby state fishing lakes, Lyon County Fishing Lake up by Redding, Kansas. Those kids, watching those kids, and in my case, I was fortunate enough to take along a nice camera and photograph a lot of them, were anybody who could spend an hour and a half doing something like that with children will come back for more, and so will the kids. There are organizations, 4-H, the legendary 4-H, which used to be just for farmers' kids, and now is open and very receptive to kids from all kinds of backgrounds. 4-H has a shooting sports program that's very carefully supervised. It involves everything from helping assist with hunter education and safety courses, but it also includes engaging the students in, first of all, sometimes just with air rifles, old BB guns, but eventually clay targets. And they have a shooting program now that's nationally coordinated. And there have been several kids from the Lyon and surrounding counties who have done so well in response to that very carefully supervised training to advance into even national level competitions. But even if they didn't, even if they weren't all that successful, okay, let's say they don't shatter 20 out of 25 clay targets. They've been outdoors. They've done several things besides just shooting at paper targets or clay targets. They've done a lot with firearm safety, and those kids. I've been around this program here in the Lyon County area long enough to know that a high percentage of those kids are tomorrow's outdoors people. And by the way, I didn't say outdoors men because there are a number of young ladies in some of those shooting sports programs through 4-H and other organizations. Scouting has a shooting program. But anyway, there are a number of those programs that have as many, not just young ladies, but really fine shots. We have a young lady from here in the Emporia area who's at Ohio State University on a full 4-year scholarship based on her nationally ranked competition in air, pellet guns, this sort of sophisticated pellet gun for marksmanship and target shooting. That's admittedly an extreme example of success, but those young people continue to enjoy the outdoors and even expand that. We have at least 2 or 3 young men who went through that 4-H shooting sports program here who are now at Kansas State or other universities, and they are in either a wildlife conservation program of some kind, sometimes wildlife biology in at least one case, and in another, really the publicity side, communication skills and publicity to become skillful writers and journalists for outdoor recreation. So, yes, it's true that we didn't see another group of hunters all afternoon yesterday. I spent about 5 days with a dear friend who's a retired wildlife biologist, now living here in Emporia, at his home state in Wisconsin, grouse hunting back in October. We did not see another grouse hunter the entire 3 or 4 days. And he himself, who grew up there, was amazed at that. But we talked about that, reflected on that on the long drive back home to Kansas, and it would seem that deer hunting and wild turkey hunting have really sort of become the predominant quarry for hunters. I guess that's a good place to stop.
Well, we could talk about this for a long time. We're talking about hunting, fishing, friendship, and the landscape across the Sunflower State with Scott Irwin, who for many years taught at the university, primary and secondary level, also wrote a column for the Emporia Gazette, many of which are enshrined in a brand new work called An Outdoor Sporting Life, a celebration of heartland hunting, fishing, friendship, and landscape by Scott Irwin. Scott, man, we could talk about this for a long time. How can our listeners find out a little bit more about your column if they have not read it, not familiar with it, and the work that you did, as well as pick up a copy of the book?
Yes. Well, first of all, I write the column now. I don't know whether this is a function of old age. I write the column just twice a month now for the Emporia Gazette, and of course that's available online. EmporiaGazette.com. Most months, my column shows up in Friday's Gazette. Sometime, and it's in the sports section. So sometimes there are tournaments and things going on. There's so much other coverage that it's on a day other than Friday. The book itself, I have a website just for the book itself, and it's easy to remember because it's the title of the book plus a .com. So it's anoutdoorsportinglife.com, and that website, as many websites are, has several pages and a little bit more background about myself, but also a blog page and ways that people can interact. As far as availability of the book, it's available, for those folks who are not in the immediate east central Kansas area. The book's available online through Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and the publisher, iUniverse.com, which is a branch of Random House. Let's see, I am currently trying to talk to the folks at the Dusty Bookshelf in Lawrence about maybe putting the book on sale. I realize they deal mostly with used books, but the book is selling in the Emporia area, Blue Stem Farm and Ranch Supply, a local gun shop called the Gun Den, even in the university's Memorial Union bookstore, and Waters True Value here in Emporia, in McPherson at the Bookshelf on Main Street. Even in Lebo, 20 miles east of us here, Alliger Drugstore is just a really neat community center and gathering place next door to the post office and across the street from the bank. Classic small town gathering place. And they've been very gracious and sold a significant number of the books in the Lebo area. Manhattan has the book at the gift shop in the Flint Hills Discovery Center, and so on. Topeka, I know Barnes & Noble in Topeka can get the book for people. Some of the larger chains, such as Barnes & Noble and so on, don't stock the book, but they can get it in like 2 days. And as with many books nowadays, which sometimes are published and printed on demand, it doesn't take very long for people to get it. If there's no one in your community who has it right away, it's within reach.
All right. Well, listen, I appreciate so much you spending time with us today, and enjoy it out there across the state, hunting and fishing, and enjoying your retirement. And would like to have you on again sometime.
Thank you very much. I'd look forward to that.
You
I
bet.
really would, and I appreciate the time you've devoted to this.
You bet. We will be back with more right after this on Lewis at Large.